This video is powered by the pros at Pascal Air Plumbing and Electric. Arkansas owned, Arkansas operated. GoPascal.com.
Bob, thanks for joining us today. Always appreciate you on these Thursdays. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you guys doing?
All right. It's raining here in Oxford. I'm hoping Arkansas and Ole Miss play today. But, this is, and I know Matt Jones wrote a piece about this. This is you get the 75th meeting between Dave Van Horn and Mike Bianco. No other SEC head coach combination has ever met more, I think, in any sport, to be quite honest. More, never in basketball, never in football. So across the conference's history, there are no two coaches that have ever matched up against each other more than the ones that are supposed to be going up against each other here today. We hear a lot about, Frank and Coach Darrell Royal, even more recently, what are some of the other coach versus coach combinations that stand out to you the same way that Dave Van Horn and Mike Bianco stand out?
Well, I guess in SEC baseball, you think about probably Skip Bertman and Ron Polk. Ron, of course, Bertman, longtime coach at LSU. I guess he won 5 national titles, and Ron Polk coached mostly Mississippi State, but also at Georgia. And then he had a second tenure at Mississippi State. When I first started covering the Razorbacks and basketball, Eddie Sutton and Abe Lemons was a big deal at the time. Certainly in the Southwest Conference, they kind of like to gig each other a little bit. Like you say, in football, Frank Broyles and Darrell Royal, that was an iconic matchup. Nolan Richardson, Tom Penders. Nolan Richardson obviously got the best at Texas. I'm not sure what his record was against Texas, but it was really good. But Tom Penders came in and made Texas more competitive, and he brought an exciting style, and I think that helped revive the Arkansas-Texas rivalry, although Arkansas really, really dominated that under Nolan. But, they had an Elite Eight game in Reunion Arena in Dallas in 1990, and Arkansas had already beaten Texas twice. I don't think they played in the Southwest Conference tournament that year, and that was a really big game, and I think it was 88-85 or something to go to the Final Four. So you didn't see that a whole lot where two conference teams would go at it for a Final Four spot. So I guess those are some of the ones that come to mind. If I had more time, I probably could jot a few down, but those are some of the ones I think about. But certainly Dave Van Horn and Mike Bianco, those guys have both been in the league for over 20 years, and Ole Miss, overall, Ole Miss has a winning record against Dave since he's been in the league. But last year, to play 3 games in Omaha, and Ole Miss won 2 out of 3. And Arkansas was probably the second best team there, I'd say, when you look at what Ole Miss did to OU. So, and Arkansas beat Ole Miss in a super regional in Fayetteville a few years ago. So a lot of high-level games between these teams.
Yeah, that's when it really the rivalry really ticked up a little bit more in 19. When they meet in the postseason, and I think you could look at the great shootout 1969, Arkansas Texas. That wasn't a postseason game, but it practically was. So it's kind of the same. It's kind of the same idea. It's just rare that conference teams play each other in the postseason, but I guess in baseball it's a little bit more often. So I guess we'd be surprised if that were to happen again. Ole Miss has really struggled, but then again, when Arkansas beat them 2 out of 3 last year, middle of the season, didn't look like they were a tournament team. So I wouldn't be ready to give up on Ole Miss right now, no doubt.
No, when Arkansas beat them that last Sunday in Fayetteville, take 2 out of 3. Ole Miss was 7-14, and they looked dead in the water. If you'd have said, what are the odds that Ole Miss goes in and say tournament, I would have said, well, not very good, maybe 25% chance or something. Then they rallied. I think they swept Missouri the next week, and then they went and swept LSU, and that was really big. That kind of got them back in it, and I think they went 14-16. They probably were maybe the last at-large team in. They were a 3 seed as an at-large. And then, of course, we all know what happened. They got on kind of like the UConn basketball, though UConn was a 4 seed overall. But, Ole Miss just kind of put it out. They had talent. They've been ranked number 1 early in the year. It's like Dave Van Horn said the other day. They had a lot of talent. They just weren't playing well. And they put it all together like Fresno State did a few years ago, in the NCAA tournament. I think Fresno State was a 3 seed. I can't remember what year that was. That was several years ago. But they won the national championship. So you got to be good, you got to be lucky, and you got to get hot at the right time. But yeah, Ole Miss at 1-8. I wouldn't bury those guys yet. Well, this is a really huge series for them, obviously.
Bob, the way basketball is going, it moves really fast. And you got Jalen Graham, Joseph Pinion, and Darian Ford saying they're coming back. What's your thoughts on those three announcing they're coming back? And I think all three of them are going to make steps up. I think Pinion's going to hit some big shots. I'm a Darian Ford guy. Do you think all three of these guys are going to have larger roles on this next year's team?
Yeah, I got to believe so. Certainly the freshmen, you feel like, it was hard to get playing time, even with some of the injuries. It was hard to get on the court when you got, Ricky Council and Anthony Black and Devo. And, Eric is known for playing a pretty tight rotation once conference play starts. He's not usually going to play 10 or 11 guys like, Nolan Richardson did, maybe like Mike Anderson would. Musk keeps it pretty tight. But, yeah, I feel like those freshmen, that's a great sign. I mean, because so many of these guys, if they're not playing, whether they're transfers or freshmen, they move on. And I get it. Everybody wants to play. But, when I was growing up, I just thought a guy like a Charles Ballantyne who played in the 80s. I mean, Charles, everybody remembers him for hitting the big shot that beat North Carolina in 1984. If you're old enough, I guess you remember. But, I remember when players would develop. I mean, Sidney Moncrief wasn't an All-American his first year, And, I think it's cool to see these guys develop in the system. I honestly was surprised Jalen Graham came back. I think it's great he did. And he had some really big games. We all know his offensive game was really good, but maybe he needed to improve defensively, maybe be more consistent rebounding-wise. And I'm obviously not privy to coach player meetings, but I have to believe, there was – if he says he's coming back, that means they wanted him back, and he wanted to come back. And there must have been conversations about, hey, this is what you need to do to get more consistent minutes. And obviously it's be more consistent on defense and rebound better. And he certainly has that skill set. And, there were a lot of times this year when Arkansas would be struggling in some games. And I think, wow, what if Trey Wade had come back? What if Adese Toney had come back? You think about a guy like Justin Smith who had such a good year when he transferred in from Indiana. And, so many of these transfers, they come in, and I get it, they have a good year, and they want to move on and play pro ball, whatever level they can, whether that's the NBA or overseas or whatever it might be. But I think getting a player back for a fifth year like Jalen Graham, a second year in the system, I don't think you can minimize what that could mean. And he's obviously going to be motivated if he's coming back rather than moving on, and the coaches obviously think he's got more upside, or else they wouldn't want him back. So I think it's really good to have an older player come back. It's great to have the freshmen come back and be sophomores, but what could a fifth-year guy like Jalen Graham do?
Yeah, I mean, for the locker room, I think it's big too. And when the incoming freshmen come in, I know I did this, Bob, my freshman year, man, you're looking at the upperclassmen and how to act and how to go about it. And so I'd love if Devo came back, but we got some good leaders if you're looking at Ford and Pinion and then Graham, people that have been there before, because you're kind of you see this in the tournament. You're going to need some upperclassmen to show the freshmen how to go about it.
Yeah, that's big. They got Trevon Brazile's coming back, which I thought he would.
Yeah,
but you never know. I don't doubt that some NBA teams would pick. He'd either be a second round pick or certainly a free agent side because he's got such a high ceiling. But also he's coming off an injury, and they want to see more what he can do. Yeah, Trevon Brazile, even though he's coming off an injury and he missed most of the season, he's going to be a third-year SEC player, and he brings a lot of maturity. He certainly brings a lot of talent. I think he'll be super motivated to show what he can do coming off that injury. He seems to be ahead of schedule on his rehab, so hopefully he'll be ready when the season starts. And, hopefully Devo comes back. Certainly don't blame him for entering the draft. I mean, I think what's cool for basketball players, we were talking to football players the other day at Pro Day, and they were talking about, the combine, how that was tough, to go through all those tests and the interviews and the medical stuff, especially. You're at the hospital probably all day.
It's a 12-hour day, yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you went through that. You remember what that was like. I mean, imagine if you could have. And the thing is, the NFL, the football players, they declare for the draft. If they're invited to combine, they go. Then they get ready for the draft. Basketball players, they can declare for the draft but maintain their eligibility, which Devo is doing. And if they get invited to the combine, they can go to the combine, and then they can still withdraw their name after that. The combine, I think, is like May 16th, 17th, something like that, and the withdrawal date is May 31st. So they can go to the combine if they get invited. Obviously, they have to get invited. They can go through all that, go through the interviews, go through the scrimmages, go through the workouts, talk to all the scouts and the GMs, whoever. And then if they decide, they're telling me I need to go back to college. And also, after going through all this, I feel like I need to go back. So I'm going to go back to Arkansas. That's not a bad option, right? You're playing for a great program, a great coach. You're getting NIL money, all that stuff. And then next year, when my eligibility is exhausted, and I go back through this process, I've already got all that experience.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, if you're Jordan Walsh, I certainly would not blame him for declaring and going through it. Keep your eligibility, and if I remember Jalen Williams going to the combine last year, and he went through one scrimmage, and they didn't go through the second one, and that was a sign that they told him you've done enough, and he obviously heard what he wanted to hear. They probably told him you're a top 40 pick, or I think he was the 34th pick, and so. But what a great thing for these players to be able to go through that process, and then if they want to come back, I think that's a great. I mean, it's tough for the coaches, like Arkansas's coaching staff and everybody, because you're wondering, well, am I getting this? You don't know until late May maybe who all is coming back. But hey, it's a good thing for the players, and obviously a guy like Eric Musselman and his staff, they've been through this. It's not their first rodeo, and so they'll figure out how to manage the roster. Coaches, baseball coaches, go through this every year. With their draft guys, not maybe knowing what their roster is going to look like until July or whatever. Maybe even going into August, which is kind of crazy. But, so hopefully Devo will come back. I think he could play in the NBA. I don't know that he'd be drafted. I think he certainly would benefit from coming back another year at Arkansas. And like I said, the NIL money has got to be good for a guy like Devo. I have no idea what he's making, but it's got to be good. He's Mr. Jacksonville, right? So
he's Yeah, Bob, he reminds me of a Clint McDaniel and a Patrick Beverly. I think Patrick Beverly even had to go overseas for a couple years to come back. I don't know what Clint did, if he kind of was bounced around. I know the time was a little different, but yeah, I mean, as far as his work ethic and talent and desire, you could see him being in a basketball camp.
Oh, yeah, Patrick Beverly, that's a great example. I was thinking about him. I think Patrick's 6'3", Devo's 6'4". Patrick, he got declared ineligible, but he didn't. He could have come back to Arkansas, I think, after he sat out a year, but he decided to go in the draft. I think he actually got drafted
he was a second-round pick, wasn't he? Yeah.
I think he was a very late pick, and I think he was either picked
Houston
by Miami, got traded to the Lakers, but anyway. So then I think he played in the summer league. Then he went overseas. He played in Greece, and then he played. I think he played
Ukraine.
in Russia, maybe.
Yeah.
And so then after about 3 years, he'd done well. He'd obviously gotten older. He'd matured. And the Rockets, you're right, the Rockets signed him to a nice deal, and he came back to the U.S. and played. And he was probably, at that point, 23, 24. But, what I remember about Patrick was he was a great rebounder for his size. I think he led the team in rebounding. He was, drove hard. I think he and Devo's games are very similar.
Mm-hmm.
Devo's probably a better outside shooter than Patrick was at that time. But, I could definitely see Devo, whether he, decides to go pro now or wait a year, which I think would be prudent, but nobody cares.
But that's the thing, Bob. They're pro now. With your NIL money, he make $500,000 or $250,000, whatever you're making, and be a Razorback.
Yeah, I think he could definitely make more money in NIL or just as much. If he goes pro, he's probably going to be in the G League or playing overseas. I think he could develop into an NBA player. I remember talking to Andrew Lang about this. You remember Andrew Lang, great big man for Eddie Sutton, and played for Nolan Richardson in the late 80s, early 90s. And Andrew had a nice long career, I think, with the Hawks and some other teams. But he was a big man. He was a shot blocker and a rebounder. I remember talking to Andrew, and he said, hey, in the NBA, you have your superstars like Michael Jordan and Charles Barkley and,
Dominique Wilkins.
Yeah, but you also have your role players. When your role might be, like Jannero Pargo, we remember him, a great Razorback. His niche was three-point shooting. He was a great three-point shooter. Some guys are lockdown defenders. That's I could see Devo making an NFL roster as a great defensive player and a big, and a guy who rebounds well for his size and a guy who can maybe, hit some outside shots. But, I mean, Devo's not a lottery pick. I mean, let's just be honest about it. You don't see him on any draft boards. I'm not saying he couldn't play in the NBA. I think he definitely has the work ethic and the desire, and I think he probably has the skill set, but it won't be easy. And so, like you say, with NIL, why not stay another year at Arkansas, keep developing your game? Who knows? Maybe, you keep going to the NCAA tournament eventually. I think Eric Musselman's going to get these guys to the Final Four. I don't know when it'll be. But the key is keep getting to the tournament, and then you see what happens. Sometimes it's a bit of a crapshoot. But, I could definitely see Devo, having a niche, like whether it's rebounding. Like I say, for big men, it might be block shots, rebounding, defense. But I could definitely see Devo playing in the NBA, but I think coming back to Arkansas would help him reach that ultimate goal.
Get analysis of every play, prop, and point at BetOnline. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to sign up and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Be sure to use our promo code BELIEVE to receive your bonus. That's BLEAV. BetOnline.ag, where the game starts.